Barbara Turner had carved out a modest, peaceful life in the sleepy coastal town of Avalon, New Jersey. 53 years old, she cherished her role as owner of the Anchor, a small, eclectic bookstore filled with the smell of aged paper, vanilla candles, and a world of stories. Her daily routine brought her comfort, and with her daughter, Brooke, by her side, she felt fulfilled in a way that most people wouldn't understand. Barbara had long abandoned any ambitions of grandeur, favoring stability, introspection, and the quiet joy of watching her customers linger, enthralled by her collection of rare finds. But all of that came crashing down one unassuming Tuesday afternoon. The call came unexpectedly, the name Victoria flashing across the screen as if it had claws that could drag Barbara backward into a world she'd fought so hard to escape. Victoria, her older sister, a symbol of tension, resentment, and heartbreak, had avoided speaking to her for years. They both settled into a life without each other, mutually unspoken but nonetheless understood. And yet, here she was, intruding into the life Barbara had painstakingly built for herself. Barbara's thumb hovered over the ignore button. She had half a mind to let it go to voicemail, to ignore Victoria's latest attempt to disrupt her life. But curiosity and a strange sense of duty won out. Her fingers tightened around the phone as she answered. "Barbara." Victoria's voice cut through the receiver with the same chill it had always carried, like an Arctic wind. "It's been a while." "Yes, it has," Barbara replied, trying to keep the edge from her own voice. "I'm calling with news," Victoria continued without any pleasantries. "Our grandmother passed away last night." Barbara's breath caught in her throat. Their grandmother, Edith, had been a constant fixture of their childhood, the only source of warmth and unconditional love in an otherwise cold family. Memories flooded her mind: Edith's soft hands, the smell of her lavender perfume, the gentle sound of her voice telling bedtime stories. "Why didn't anyone tell me sooner?" Barbara managed to whisper, her voice betraying her pain. "I assumed you'd hear it from someone else," Victoria said, dismissive, as if her words didn't matter. "I've been busy with the arrangements." Of course, Barbara thought bitterly. Victoria always took charge, always needed control, as if she were managing a business transaction rather than a family tragedy. But Barbara knew the subtext: Victoria didn't think she was capable of handling anything herself. It was the same attitude she'd had since they were children. "I'm coming to the funeral," Barbara said, her voice firm. "Suit yourself," Victoria replied coldly. "I just wanted to make sure you were aware. And I assume you'll keep things, well, let's just say I hope you won't make a scene." A surge of anger shot through Barbara. Even now, Victoria thought she could dictate terms, manage her like an unruly employee. She took a deep breath, refusing to let her sister bait her. "Thank you for letting me know," Barbara replied, keeping her voice steady. "I'll see you at the funeral." As the call ended, Barbara felt the weight of the years pressing down on her. A mixture of grief, nostalgia, and resentment swirling inside her. She glanced at the photo of her daughter, Brooke, on the shelf, reminding herself that she wasn't that timid young woman anymore. This time she would face Victoria on her own terms. The funeral took place in a grand old chapel overlooking the sea, its Gothic architecture a stark contrast to the small, quiet life Edith had led. Barbara arrived with Brooke by her side, a comforting presence amid the tension. As they approached the entrance, Barbara felt a tremor of anticipation, a simmering resentment she'd kept buried for decades rising to the surface. Inside the chapel, Victoria was standing near the casket, dressed impeccably in designer black. Her face was a study in solemnity, every movement calculated, every glance practiced. To onlookers, she was the grieving granddaughter, the successful daughter returning to pay her respects. But Barbara saw the truth beneath the facade. She could sense it in the way Victoria's eyes flitted around the room, ensuring she held the sympathy and admiration of everyone present. When Barbara finally approached her, Victoria's face softened into a condescending smile. "Barbara," she said, her tone laced with false warmth, "you made it." "Yes, I did," Barbara replied, meeting her gaze without wavering. "I wanted to say goodbye." "Of course. It's nice to see you took some time away from your bookstore." Victoria's words were laden with subtle derision, a jab at the life Barbara had chosen. Barbara clenched her fists, fighting the urge to snap back. The air between them was taut, filled with the unspoken tensions of a lifetime. She could feel Brooke's hand on her shoulder, grounding her, giving her the strength to maintain her composure. As the ceremony began, Barbara couldn't help but watch Victoria. Her sister basked in the attention, accepting condolences with the practiced grace of someone who'd perfected the art of public sympathy. Barbara felt a pang of anger how had Victoria twisted things to always come out on top, no matter the situation. After the ceremony, as guests milled about, Victoria turned to Barbara once more, her voice hushed. "I hope you understand that things will be handled appropriately. I'll be managing the estate." Barbara narrowed her eyes. "I'm sure that's what you think, but don't assume I'll just go along with whatever you decide." Victoria's expression hardened, the mask slipping just enough to reveal a flash of irritation. "You know as well as I do that I'm the only one capable of handling this." "Handling it?" Barbara repeated, her voice steely. "Or controlling it?" The words hung between them, a silent challenge. For the first time in years, Barbara felt a sense of empowerment, a defiance she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. She wasn't going to let Victoria walk all over her, not anymore. After the funeral, Barbara and Brooke returned home, each lost in their thoughts. Brooke, sensitive to her mother's turmoil, finally spoke up, her tone filled with a quiet resolve. "Mom, I think people need to see the real side of her. She's been putting you down for so long, why not let people see the truth?" Barbara felt a thrill of rebellion at her daughter's words. She'd never considered herself a fighter, always taking the path of least resistance. But something in Brooke's voice stirred a resolve deep within her. Together, they concocted a plan, a subtle, powerful way to let the world see Victoria for who she really was. Brooke suggested filming a video, an honest account of Barbara's experiences, without naming names. Just a heartfelt story of betrayal, resilience, and survival. The video was shot in Barbara's bookstore, an intimate setting that matched the confessional tone of her story. Barbara recounted the pain of her sister's betrayals, the way Victoria had stolen Andy, the way she'd always made Barbara feel small and unimportant. The video was raw and real, and as Barbara spoke, she felt the weight of her past lifting, piece by piece. They posted it online, never expecting the response it would receive. Within days, the video had spread across social media, capturing the attention of people near and far. The comments poured in sympathy, encouragement, and even anger on Barbara's behalf. Friends, acquaintances, and even distant family members reached out, recognizing the thinly veiled references to Victoria. For the first time in her life, Barbara's voice was heard, and she felt a sense of validation she hadn't known she craved. But with that validation came consequences that would ripple through Victoria's life in ways neither of them had anticipated. As word of the video spread, Victoria's life began to crumble in the most public, humiliating way. Her carefully crafted image, the perfect marriage, the successful career, the adoring circle of friends was called into question, piece by piece. Andy, weary of the years of deception, finally reached his breaking point. The strain of Victoria's lies, her manipulations had taken its toll, and he filed for divorce, cutting ties with the woman he'd once loved but had grown to resent. Their son, struggling under the weight of his own battles, was placed in a care facility, as Victoria was no longer able to manage his needs alone. Victoria, stripped of her husband's support, found herself isolated. Friends distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the scandal and whispers that now surrounded her. Her once solid social circle dissolved, leaving her vulnerable and exposed in a way she'd never been before. The irony was not lost on Barbara, who watched from a distance as her sister's empire of lies collapsed. But despite the satisfaction of seeing Victoria face consequences, Barbara couldn't ignore the emptiness that lingered. This wasn't what she'd wanted, this wasn't closure. The fallout from the video's success brought an unexpected visitor. Barbara's mother, Judith, arrived one quiet afternoon, stepping hesitantly into the anchor. Barbara hadn't expected to see her mother so soon, especially after the turbulent events stirred up by the video. Judith looked around, taking in the cozy, warm atmosphere of her daughter's bookstore as if seeing it for the first time. She hesitated, wringing her hands before meeting Barbara's gaze. "I watched the video," she began, her voice shaky. I didn't know you felt all that." Barbara could feel the walls she'd spent years building waver. She took a breath and gestured to a seat near the large bay window overlooking the street. "Let's talk." Judith sat down, her eyes reflecting a vulnerability that was foreign to Barbara. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," Judith said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I always thought Victoria needed me more, that you'd be fine. You were always so resilient, or so I thought, but maybe that was just an excuse I used to avoid looking deeper." Barbara felt a pang in her chest, her mother's words stirring emotions she hadn't expected. For so long she'd assumed her mother's favoritism had been willful, that she'd chosen to ignore the harm Victoria inflicted. Hearing an apology, however overdue, softened something within her. "I needed you too, Mom," Barbara said softly, her voice filled with years of pent-up sadness. "But I don't want to live in the past anymore. I'm done with all the resentment." Her mother nodded, reaching across the table to grasp Barbara's hand. "Thank you for saying that. I just hope you can forgive me someday." The two women sat in silence for a while, the weight of their past unspoken yet acknowledged. Barbara felt something shift within her, a crack in the bitterness she'd carried for so long. She didn't know if she could truly forgive, but she was ready to move forward. The reconciliation with her mother planted a new idea in Barbara's mind. The response to her video, combined with the heartfelt messages she'd received, made her realize that she wasn't alone. People across the community had shared similar experiences of family conflict, betrayal, and unresolved wounds. Her pain, her journey could serve as a catalyst for others. One evening, as she was closing up the bookstore, Brooke approached her with an idea. "Mom, you should start something here. A support group, or maybe a workshop. People could come to share their stories, sort of like a community bridge, where they can find a way to heal." Barbara considered it. Over the years, she had transformed the Anchor into a place of refuge, a space where people felt at ease. The thought of turning it into something more, a sanctuary for those struggling with family discord and personal hardship, felt strangely right. With Brooke's encouragement, Barbara reached out to a local counselor and some of her longtime customers who had shared their stories with her. She named the initiative the Avalon Bridge, a nod to the path she was taking in bridging her past with her future. Word spread quickly. People from the community began attending her sessions, sharing stories of family rifts, betrayals, and painful secrets. Barbara led the group with humility and compassion, understanding that each person had wounds they were trying to heal. And with each meeting, she felt her own sense of peace growing, as if by helping others she was stitching together the frayed edges of her own heart. The support group quickly became a lifeline, both for Barbara and for those who attended. But just as she was beginning to find peace, a letter arrived in the mail, one she never expected. It was from Victoria. The letter was written in a careful, controlled script, though the words revealed desperation. "Barbara, I have nothing left. I never meant for things to go this way. I made mistakes, yes I did. And maybe I let my pride and ambition cloud what really mattered. I've lost everything, and now you're all I have left." Victoria's words continued, an apology mingled with regret and self-pity, a faint plea for reconciliation. Barbara read it over and over, wondering if this was genuine remorse or just another one of Victoria's manipulations. But something had shifted in her. She no longer felt the need to judge, to decide if Victoria's motives were sincere. She wasn't seeking her sister's approval, nor did she need her forgiveness to be at peace. That evening, Barbara sat at her desk and penned a reply. Her response was measured, honest, and firm. She told Victoria she hoped she could find the strength to rebuild her life and make amends where possible, but she also made it clear that her own healing was a journey she needed to undertake alone. For the first time, she felt free of her sister's influence, free from the need to salvage a relationship that had been broken beyond repair. As the Avalon Bridge grew, so did Barbara's sense of purpose. The bookstore, once a place of quiet refuge, had become a hub of healing, a place where people felt seen and heard. She and Brooke expanded their outreach, organizing workshops and inviting local speakers to talk about forgiveness, resilience, and the journey of moving forward. Brooke's own growth mirrored her mother's journey. Inspired by Barbara's courage, she took steps to pursue her passions, enrolling in social work classes with a focus on family counseling. Watching her daughter come into her own brought Barbara an immense sense of fulfillment. Her legacy was no longer tied to the bitterness of the past, but to the new life she and Brooke were creating, built on understanding and compassion. One sunny afternoon, Barbara stood at the entrance of the Anchor, watching as people gathered for one of their meetings. She felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that she'd turned her pain into something meaningful, that she'd created a space where others could find comfort and strength. And in that moment, she understood that healing wasn't a destination but a journey, one she was proud to be on, no matter where it led. The burdens of her past no longer weighed her down. They had become the foundation of her strength. For the first time, Barbara felt at peace, truly free to embrace the life she had built and the community she'd come to cherish. And as she looked out over the bustling room, filled with laughter and warmth, she knew she had finally found her own version of happiness, a life defined not by the betrayals of the past, but by the resilience and purpose she'd reclaim. So if you love this story, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and comment below. Your interaction helps us grow.